This is William T. Vollman at the Border, Part 4, The Mafias, from which this piece gets its title, actually. Quote, "Just keep going north and you'll find the wall," close quote. Antonia's well-wishers had advised her. Then what? Quote, "We got to the big wall and weren't able to cross it, so we walked further away and had to walk," close quote. So that was what she had done, simply pushing on and pushing on like the little engine that could until she won the victory, which is to say the ankle bracelet. But had it really been that easy? First of all, once she encountered the wall, how much further away had she and the child needed to walk? In most such interviews, I came to learn that migrants possessed only the sketchiest notions of the localities, roads, and distances that confronted them. But I could not immediately perceive this fact, and so when I got to the Mexican side of Nogales, I assumed that either westward or eastward the wall must end in what I thought of as a walking distance. Quote, "It goes maybe 25 miles," said the previously introduced Mexican policeman who covered his face. Open quote, "I believe it's all wall up that way," close quote. "What's the saddest thing you've seen?" I asked him. Quote, "We can start from today. I saw a kid who came from Guerrero. He actually had a bullet sticking out of his shin. He was feeding his animals out on the farm and shooting broke out and he felt something burning. He went to the hospital, got a letter from the police saying he had no bad record. I just gave him a little advice on what to do, how to stay off the streets. He just went to the shelter," close quote. "Is it true that the Mexican side of the border is dangerous to both east and west?" Close quote. The policeman insisted, quote, "As long as you're not involved with anything suspicious, you can go anywhere you want," close quote. But I asked 5 taxi drivers in a row for a wall cruise, and they all turned me down, citing mafias. It was almost 5 at night when I got into a taxi and swung down the bumpy road. The driver said that it got dangerous past the next crossing on account of mafias. We were headed west. He said it was worse to the east. Before I knew it, we had passed the renowned Motel Miami, whose restaurant boasted TV color. Next came a sandstone cliff with the wall on top of it, a declamation Palestina Libre Boycott Israel, and a handwritten sign for a car wash. And we ascended the hill that followed the wall. 2 pretty girls leaned against a white car as the gray sky began to darken. The wall blocked off the backyards of many tiny houses. By now, Nogales' Arizona incarnation had ended. Through the border slats, I saw nothing but grass and brush. That was my America right there. Pastel greenish brown of grass furring the rolling hills. Finally, we glimpsed a white border patrol car with its lights on, and the wall continued, jig-jagging up a dry hill, with the driver now worrying about the bad part, for we had nearly reached the Mariposa port of entry, which he described as, quote, "the big one where the trucks are, and then it gets dangerous," close quote. "What would happen?" I inquired. "Many things," he said sullenly. Creeping down the hill into Colonia Reforma, we turned right and left, achieving a place where the local wall was sheet metal and the American wall was out of sight. Here came a graveyard, dry and crowded with tombs. The driver kept crabbing about how dangerous it was, so I told him to find me a mafia princess. Quote, "There are definitely princesses here. Mafia princesses, I'm not so sure," close quote. There by Taqueria La Niña was the Mariposa crossing. I saw a sign pointing toward Hermosillo and a long line of America-aimed cars on one lane of the curving, otherwise empty road. That was as far as he cared to go. Quote, "See that white truck right there?" he said. "That could be a mafia truck," close quote. "What makes you think so?" He would not answer, leaving me ignorant and skeptical. Quote, "I can drop you here if you want to take pictures," he eventually allowed. Quote, "Even if you were shot, I would wait for you." Close quote. "But if I got shot, how would you get paid?" He frowned at that. So I got out, leaving my laptop on the back seat, and thanks to some recent abdominal surgery, crept rather than scrambled up onto a reddish berm of sand where I found myself amid a line of old trucks, all of them with dark tinted windows, looking down on the border station. As I wandered forward, meaning to photograph this dreary vista just beyond the trucks, low, weed-grown hummocks of garbage and broken concrete marked the edge of my vantage point, and then considerably below, that narrow-looking black ribbon of border wall ran straighter and smoother than usual, behind which lay some sort of enclosed park for white vehicles belonging, I would guess, to the Border Patrol. Then came an immense rectangular bureaucratic edifice whose roof sloped up away from Mexico. Just rightward of this stretched the many tunnel lanes of the actual port of entry, with traffic backed up as usual. Directly in line with the latter, on a nearby Mexican hill, rose a corrugated roofed shrine. Between two concrete pillars, the Virgin of Guadalupe clasped her hands. A long rosary streamed down from her wrists, and a tilted cross stood knee-high before her. Flowers grew from a plastic bucket beside her, and a baseball cap lay at her feet. I don't know if you can get that. Raising my camera, I twice tripped the shutter, and from inside the truck on my immediate left came soft wails of women and children. I believe with all my heart, but of course cannot prove, that I was hearing would-be migrants waiting for darkness to be sent over or around the wall, whose termination some people in town had said was another 2 or 3 miles from Mariposa, although others claimed it ran much farther to the west. I had been hoping to see a spot where Antonia, Samuel, and their children had crossed without help, but since the driver had reached his limit and the prickling at the back of my neck advised me to get out of there immediately before some mafia or other penalized me for disrupting business, I retreated down the berm. Nothing like this had ever happened to me along the California-Mexico border. To be sure, even there were places that it was inadvisable to go at night, but never any 24-hour no-go zones. Mentioning this fact to the driver, I asked, quote, "No one was ever afraid there, so what's so different here?" "I've never been there," he predictably replied. "I'm from here." Again and again on the way back, he insisted on the mafia border menace. "What do you think of Trump?" I asked him. He laughed. "I don't know. I hate Trump," I said, "but all these things you say about the border, they sound like what Trump says. He goes on about cartels." Close quote. As usual, the driver would not answer. We began to drive back down along that snaky, rust-red monster of a wall. I had him stop from time to time so that I could take more notes and photographs, many of which are in this article, obviously. One place was painted white with an inward, each slat wearing a doubled letter so that it looked like LLIIBBEERRTTAADD. Three white pairs of stylized handprints marching down the dark metal beneath each letter pair, with crisscross fence wires and white American houses behind and between them. It was as if tiny children had pressed both of their palms against that concretion in tidily understated protest. Tidily. D-I-D-I-L-Y. I remember a high hill of dirt with concrete houses on it, and right by this was an installation of small white crosses. One cross read peace and joy. On another dark slat, 3 interlaced crosses spelled out La Madre and Carlos. And this one, probably courtesy of some Anglo activist, "Our love radiates." Other crosses skittered across the wall at odd angles and spacings, then skittered out, overwhelmed at last by the wall's obduracy. In a different spot, which must have been closer to the American side's central district, for beyond the boundary the houses stood grander, a row of weathered wooden crosses leaned against those dark posts, and again, upon the wall's slanting, coarse-grained concrete base. Someone had written, Chinga la migra. Chinga la migra. Another cross was for Jorge Solis Palma. His presumed death doubtless kept Americans safer. The same could be said of Juan Mendez, age 18. Now we had returned to the taxi stand. Once more I tried asking the driver to roll east, and again he refused, since that would entail taking a hill through a neighborhood that was off limits. And again I wondered how Antonia and Samuel could have gotten across without a coyote. They might have walked some dreary distance as a matter of course, or perhaps they had paid their respective passages after all, under conditions of mafia intimidation that led them to keep that secret. Very late that night, a man I met on the street downtown 3 blocks from the wall. He was a kindly person who offered me crystal meth for free. He assured me that the mafias were not gangsters in any bad sense, but a sort of local police who protected everyone by, quote, cutting off the hands, unquote, of evildoers. He said that poor people who needed to cross the border could count on receiving help from them. Hearing this, I wondered whether Antonia and Samuel had been allowed to pay on a sliding scale. That was on Saturday. Sunday morning found us back on the Arizona side of Nogales, watching a long freight train clank through a gap in the razor wire and on into Mexico, while someone in a black CBP raincoat turned away from it, trudging into the drizzle. Then another man in a black uniform with some kind of official patch on his shoulder inspected the exit place with a weary officiousness. The fixer and I had driven to the Morley port of entry because the fixer craved his American chain coffee, and while the Mexican-American barista made it, I asked where the nearest dangerous patch of border might be because we wanted to see some mafias. Chuckling at my whimsicality or stupidity, she said, quote, Morley, close quote. So here we were. I must now sorrowfully report that we never got decapitated or even shot, although we certainly garnered eyefuls of the president's razory tinsel. We began our safari at the payphone sign for 4 minutos 50 cents a todo Mexico, right there at the crossroads of North Morley Avenue and East International Street, with fence and wire commencing at warning, no trespassing, restricted area, keep out, authorized personnel only, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, danger. And there rose the wall with coils of razor wire on top, and before it a low fence to no man's land. I think we should stop there and pick up there for the next section. So we're going to do that. Okay? Yes, and I will edit later. This is the effort I promised you.